And welcome back to Thinking Deliberately. Today is episode 8 and one of my favourites. We're going to talk about things like the MBTI, Enneagram, and other comfortable cages. In the last episode, we took a swing at emotional intelligence, not because emotion doesn't matter, it does, but because emotional intelligence often fails to measure the thing that matters the most: awareness of construction. So today I want to continue this demolition, and this time I want to talk about personality types. Now, obviously, there are videos on YouTube as well. We're going to look at MBTI, Enneagram, DISC, color profiles, strength profiles, leadership styles, team roles, archetypes, labels, categories, and little psychological horoscopes with better branding. And yes, I know, people love them and organizations use them a lot. And they love them because they feel seen, and they love them because they offer language. Why else do they love them? Because they turn the chaos of being human into something tidy enough to put on a slide. You know, I am an INTJ, which is actually my type. Or I'm a type 4, I'm a high D. You get the point. Well, maybe I'm a visionary. Well, I'm just wired this way. And that's the point, isn't it? The last sentence is the trap. I'm just wired this way. Not really. You may be habituated this way. You may be rewarded this way, defended or wounded this way. And more importantly, you're going to be socially reinforced this way. And you may have practiced this construction so often that it now feels like wiring. But do not confuse familiarity with truth. Do not confuse repetition with identity, and don't confuse a label with awareness, because a label can be useful, but it can also become a cage. And the clever thing about these cages is that people decorate them from the inside. They put cushions in them and invite friends over with the same labels. They join online groups. They might even have a poker group. You never know. They share memes or memes, and they say things like, "This is so me." And every time they say it, the bars get stronger. This is the danger of typology. It gives people the pleasure of recognition without necessarily requiring the discomfort of development. Recognition feels like growth, but it is not the same thing. Recognition says, that explains me. Development says, well, now what am I going to do with that awareness? And most people stop at recognition. They find the label, feel briefly understood, and then spend years defending the pattern that the label's revealed. And that is not development. That is a psychological interior design, if you like. You've not escaped the room. You've just changed the wallpaper. Now, to be fair, I understand why these models are popular. Human beings are complicated. You know, the self is messy and behavior is contextual. Maybe even motivation is layered and relationships could be difficult. So when a model comes along and says, here are 16 types, or here are 9 numbers, or here are 4 colors, people feel relief. Finally, the madness has structure. Finally, there's a map, and maps can be useful, but the problem begins when people mistake the map for the territory. Worse, even more so, they mistake the map for themselves. I am an introvert. There's definitely a video on this. No, you may construct energy, safety, stimulation, and social demand in a particular way. Or I am a type 8. No, you may construct vulnerability as danger and control as protection. I am a helper. Nope. You're probably just constructing your value through being needed, which we've talked about. The label names the surface. It does not necessarily reveal the construction underneath. And if we stop at the surface, we do not develop. We simply become more articulate about our prison. And this is where constructive development theory takes a different path. CDT doesn't ask, what type are you? It asks, what are you constructing? What are you intending? What are you aware of? What choices are available? What response are you producing? And crucially, are you aware enough to construct differently when the context requires it? That is the question typology often fails to ask. I'd pretty much say all the time. It describes tendencies, but development is not merely the description of tendencies. Development is the increasing capacity to become aware of those tendencies while they are operating and to choose beyond them when necessary. So let me say that again. Development is not knowing your type. I'm not developed because I think that I am INTJ. Development is being less imprisoned by it. Now, for me, that means I don't have to be INTJ. I can choose. And that is why I have a problem with the way these tools are often used. They turn patterns into identities. They turn habits into truths. They turn defenses into personality. And then they turn limitations into branding. They turn, I tend to do this, into this is who I am. And once something becomes who I am, it becomes much harder to question. Because now if someone challenges the behavior, they are not merely challenging a behavior. They are challenging your identity. And identity fights back. This is why typology can make people more defended, not less. You say, you interrupted me 3 times in that meeting, and they say, yes, I'm a high D, as if the label is an explanation or apology or a legal defense all at once. And you say, you avoided that difficult conversation. And they say, well, yeah, I'm an introvert. I need space. Maybe. Or maybe you avoided responsibility and used introversion as a cover. You say you keep rescuing people who have not asked to be rescued. And they say, yeah, that's because I'm a helper. It's just my Enneagram type. No, that may be your unexamined need to be necessary. What about people who dominate every conversation? Well, I'm a natural leader. No, you may be constructing silence as weakness and control as competence. This is why these models can become dangerous. Not because they are always wrong, but because they are often used too early, too lazily, and too literally. They give people a noun when what they need is a verb. I am an introvert. Nope. You are introverting in this context, through this construction, with this intention, at this level of awareness. I am a perfectionist. Nope. You are constructing safety through control and calling it standards. What about somebody who says, I'm an empath? Well, they're probably just constructing their identity around sensitivity to others, while quietly making their emotional world about you. And that one annoys people, and it should, because empath has become one of the most self-flattering labels in modern pop psychology. It sounds noble, it sounds sensitive, it sounds spiritually evolved. But sometimes being an empath just means having poor emotional boundaries and a strong need to feel special because you notice other people's moods. Not always, but sometimes. And unless we are willing to question the construction, the label becomes sacred. And that is the problem. The Enneagram has the same issue. It can be useful and it can reveal repeated motivational patterns. It can give people a starting language for self-observation. But it can also become a beautifully complex cage. People do not merely say, I have a pattern. They say, I am 4, which is actually also a very good film. Or I am 5, 8. I am Groot. I am 2 with a 3 wing and a self-preservation subtype. It's just nonsense. At some point, this stops being development and starts sounding like spiritual train spotting. People become experts in the architecture of their cage. They can describe the hinges, the bars, the lighting, the historical origins, and the symbolic meaning of the lock, but they still live inside it. MBTI does something similar. It offers people a type that can feel wonderfully explanatory. And again, it may create useful conversation. But what happens next? If someone says, I am an INTJ, what have we really learned? Have we learned how they construct threat, how they construct intimacy, evidence, or maybe how they respond to ambiguity, how aware they are of their own assumptions, whether they can hold multiple perspectives under pressure without getting cognitive dissonance, or whether they can choose beyond their habits, whether they can notice the self being defended? No, they can't. What we have is just a shorthand. It could be a useful shorthand to somebody else who knows what INTJ means, but it's still a shorthand. And they become dangerous when it pretends to be depth. And this is my central criticism. Typology often confuses pattern recognition with developmental understanding. It says, here is the pattern. So what? CDT asks, how is the pattern constructed? How aware is the person of it? And can they choose differently? And that is a much deeper question, because 2 people can have the same type and function at very different levels of awareness. In fact, if you were to put CDT into the MBTI, you would then have the 16 boxes at each level of my awareness quotient, and you'd probably make the whole thing about 600% more robust. Perhaps I should call them. So 2 so-called introverts may be nothing alike developmentally. One may avoid people because social interaction feels threatening, and another may enjoy solitude but engage deeply and deliberately when the context calls for it. Same label, different construction, different level of awareness, and also different cognitive intentions being used. One's an away from and one's a towards. So 2 so-called leaders may both be confident. One constructs leadership as dominance. The other constructs leadership as responsibility for complexity. Same behavioral category, different world. 2 people may both describe themselves as helpers. One helps because they genuinely see what is needed and can respond cleanly. The other helps because not helping would threaten their identity. Same outcome, same behavior, different intention, different awareness. And this is why CDT matters. It does not stop at the behavior. It asks what is constructing the behavior. And it does not stop at self-description. It asks whether the person can become aware of the construction in real time. That is the difference between a personality model and a developmental model. Personality model says, this is your pattern. A developmental model asks, what is your relationship to the pattern? Are you inside it? Are you defending it? Are you performing it? Is it just an excuse? Are you even able to observe it? And can you choose beyond it? Can you reconstruct yourself in response to context? And that is the real work. This is why people sometimes prefer personality models to development. Personality models are comforting. Development might not be. Personality models say, here is who you are. Development says, here is what you may need to outgrow. Personality models offer recognition. Development asks for responsibility. And then personality models give you a mirror. Development asks whether you are brave enough to stop posing in front of it. And let's be honest, a lot of people do not want development. They want a flattering explanation for staying the same. They want to be told that their defensiveness is passion, their avoidance is sensitivity, their control is high standards, their arrogance is confidence. The problem is, the market is very happy to sell them exactly those things, because self-recognition sells better than self-disruption. A course that says, discover your type will always be more popular than one that says, come and examine the constructions you have mistaken for yourself. One feels exciting, the other sounds like a threat, but only one of them is likely to produce real development. Now, I'm not saying that we should throw away every model because that would be too easy. The question is not whether the MBTI, Enneagram, DISC or whatever can be useful. The question is, useful for what? If a model helps someone begin to notice a pattern, fine, fair enough. If it creates language for reflection, fine. If it opens a conversation or helps a team see differences in preference and how people behave, then that's good. But if it becomes an identity, it has become a problem. If it reduces complexity, it's a problem. And if it prevents choice, which is the most important thing, it's definitely a problem. If it makes someone more loyal to their pattern than to their development, it has become a cage. And that is why CDT reframes the whole thing. You're not a type, you're not a number, you're not a color, you're not a profile, you're not a fixed collection of traits waiting to be described. You are a constructing organism. You are constructing self, context, and response through cognitive intentions, thinking styles, levels of awareness, and dynamic intelligence. And the question is not which category do I belong to? The question is, what am I constructing now? And am I aware enough to choose something different? That question is a bit harder. It's less marketable and it doesn't fit neatly on a mug. It does not give you a cute online quiz result to share with your friends, but it does have one advantage. It might actually develop you. Because awareness begins where identity loosens. As long as the label is sacred, the pattern remains protected. But the moment you can say, you know what, this is not who I am, this is what I am constructing, you have created space. And in that space, choice becomes possible. And you can notice the introvert construction and still choose to speak. You can notice the helper construction and still choose not to rescue, or the leader construction, and you can choose to listen. Maybe the analytical construction is there and you can choose to feel instead. You can notice the rebel construction and choose not to oppose merely because opposition gives you identity, or even it gives you some kind of interaction. You can notice the victim construction and choose responsibility without denying harm. See, this is all development, not becoming label free in some naive way, but becoming less owned by the labels, less flattered by them and less defended by them, less trapped in the little psychological costume you have mistaken for a self. So here is the uncomfortable question for this episode. Which of your labels are helping you see, and which are helping you hide? Which ones opened awareness and which ones quietly became excuses? Where have you said, this is just who I am, when the more accurate sentence would be, this is the pattern I am currently not developed enough to choose beyond. And that one can sting a little bit. And my favorite question really is to ask, can you choose not to? The aim of this podcast is not reassurance, it's awareness. And awareness often begins by insulting the part of us that wanted a comfortable explanation. So by all means, use the models, take the quiz, read the profile, find the language, enjoy the moment of recognition of being an INTJ, but do not build a home there. Do not turn the label into an altar, and don't confuse being described with being developed. And don't mistake the comfort of a category for the freedom of awareness. This is thinking deliberately. And today's uncomfortable thought is this one. Your personality type may explain your pattern, but it may also be the most socially acceptable way you have found to avoid outgrowing it. Thank you.